in the musty wood-paneled office of the small-town Montana lawyer was thick with the scent of old paper and dust motes dancing in the afternoon sun. Eleanor Ellie Vance, impeccably dressed in a crisp ivory linen suit that cost more than the lawyer's entire office furniture, sat ramrod straight, her expensive leather briefcase resting on her lap. She was a corporate lawyer from Manhattan, and she was here for one reason: to finalize the estate of her estranged, eccentric great-uncle Silas. She wanted to be in and out in under an hour. "Thank you for coming, Miss Vance," said Mr. Abernathy, a man whose tweed jacket looked as old as the town itself. "And Mr. Callahan, thank you for making the drive." Ellie barely glanced at the man seated across from her. Jake Callahan was everything her world was not. He was a wall of muscle and worn denim, his face weathered by sun and wind, his dark eyes narrowed with a suspicion that seemed to be his default setting. He smelled of leather, sweat, and honest dirt. He was the owner of the Broken Spur Ranch, the sprawling property that bordered her uncle's small, valuable parcel of land. The parcel Ellie was sure she was about to inherit and immediately sell. "Let's get this over with, Abernathy," Jake grunted, his voice a low rumble that vibrated in the small room. "I've got a herd waiting." Ellie nodded in agreement. "Yes, time is of the essence. I have a flight back to New York this evening." Mr. Abernathy cleared his throat, adjusting his spectacles. "Right. Well, Silas was a character. His final wishes are, shall we say, unconventional." He began to read the will, a dry recitation of assets and bequests. Ellie tuned out until she heard the name of the property she was interested in: the Willow Creek pasture, a 500-acre tract that contained the only reliable year-round spring in the valley. "And to my great-niece, Eleanor Vance, and to my esteemed neighbor, Jacob Callahan, I bequeath the Willow Creek pasture, including all structures and water rights, under the following stipulation." Ellie's perfectly manicured hand tightened on her briefcase. "Stipulation?" Mr. Abernathy paused for dramatic effect, then delivered the shocking event that would shatter Ellie's meticulously planned life and Jake's precarious future. "The property is to be held jointly. Neither party may sell, lease, or otherwise encumber the land for a period of 3 calendar months, commencing today, June 19th. Furthermore, during this period, both Eleanor Vance and Jacob Callahan must reside in the foreman's cabin on the property and actively participate in the maintenance and operation of the land, as determined by the executor, which is me, Mr. Abernathy. If either party abandons the property for more than 48 consecutive hours, or if they fail to work together to maintain the land, the entire Willow Creek pasture, including all water rights, shall immediately pass to Mr. Sterling of Sterling Development." The silence that followed was so absolute, Ellie could hear the frantic thumping of her own heart. Jake Callahan shot out of his chair, his face a mask of thunderous disbelief. "What in the hell did you just say?" "Silas was clear, Jake," Mr. Abernathy said, flinching. "He wanted to ensure the land wasn't immediately sold to a developer, and he believed the two of you, working together, were the only ones who could truly appreciate its value." Ellie, the corporate shark who never lost her composure, felt the blood drain from her face. 3 months, on a ranch, with him. And if they failed, the land, the vital water source that kept Jake's ranch alive, would go to a developer. She knew Sterling Development. They were notorious for strip mining the land and selling off the water rights. "This is absurd," Ellie finally managed, her voice tight with controlled fury. "I'm a partner at a law firm. I have a life, a career, a mortgage. I can't just play cowgirl for a summer." Jake turned his blazing gaze on her. "Play cowgirl? Lady, this land is the only thing keeping my cattle alive through the summer drought. Silas knew that. He knew Sterling would bleed us dry. He's forcing us to save the valley, and he's saddled me with a liability in a linen suit. A liability? Ellie stood up, matching his height in her heels, though she had to crane her neck to meet his eyes. I'm the one who can find the legal loophole to get us out of this ridiculous, antiquated stipulation. There are no loopholes, Miss Vance, Mr. Abernathy interjected weakly. Silas's will was ironclad. You have until sundown to move into the cabin. I'll be checking in daily. Ellie looked at Jake, his jaw clenched, his eyes burning with a mixture of rage and desperation. He was a man fighting for his life, and she was the unexpected, unwelcome anchor tied to his leg. Her flight was canceled. Her summer was gone. Her life as she knew it was over. Fine, she spat, adjusting her suit jacket. Where is this cabin? Jake let out a harsh, humorless laugh. Welcome to the Broken Spur, City Slicker. You're about to find out what real work is. Part 2. Clash of Worlds. The foreman's cabin was less a cabin and more a glorified shack. It was small, smelled faintly of mildew and pine needles, and had exactly 2 rooms, a main living-kitchen area and a single bedroom with 2 narrow iron-frame beds separated by a rickety nightstand. Ellie stared at the beds. Absolutely not. Jake tossed his duffel bag onto the bed nearest the window, sending up a cloud of dust. Don't be dramatic, Vance. It's a bed. We're here to work, not host a slumber party. I am not sharing a room with a man I just met, who looks like he hasn't seen a barber or a dry cleaner in a decade, she retorted, clutching her designer suitcase like a shield. And I'm not sharing a room with a woman who looks like she'd melt if a drop of water touched her, Jake shot back, pulling off his worn leather gloves. But Silas didn't give us a choice. We're stuck. Now unpack your fancy clothes and try not to get them dirty. We start before dawn. The first week was a brutal, silent war. Ellie tried to maintain her professional demeanor, treating the ranch like a hostile takeover. She spent her days on her laptop, searching for precedents, calling her firm, and trying to find a way to invalidate the will. Jake, meanwhile, assigned her tasks that were clearly designed to break her spirit, mucking out the horse stalls, hauling heavy feed sacks, and worst of all, repairing a mile of barbed wire fence under the relentless Montana sun. She was miserable. Her hands were blistered, her skin was burned despite the expensive sunscreen, and her tailored clothes were replaced by borrowed, ill-fitting work shirts and jeans that smelled faintly of horse. One afternoon, she was struggling to lift a heavy roll of wire when Jake rode up on his powerful chestnut mare, Dusty. He watched her for a moment, his expression unreadable. "You're doing it wrong," he said, his voice flat. "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize my Ivy League education included a minor in fence mending," Ellie snapped, dropping the wire with a frustrated groan. He dismounted, his movements fluid and economical. "It's not about education. It's about leverage. You're fighting the weight instead of using it." He walked over, his presence overwhelming. He didn't touch her, but he stood close enough that she could feel the heat radiating off him. He took the wire roll, braced it against his hip, and showed her how to use her body weight to unroll it smoothly. "See? Work smarter, not harder, lawyer." Ellie watched him, mesmerized not by the lesson, but by the sheer, raw competence of the man. His muscles flexed under the faded cotton of his shirt, and the sun caught the gold flecks in his dark eyes. He was undeniably handsome, in a rough, untamed way that was completely foreign to her. "I'm trying," she admitted, her voice softer than she intended. "I know," he said, and for the first time, the suspicion in his eyes was replaced by a flicker of something else, maybe grudging respect. "But you're trying to do it the city way. Out here, you have to listen to the land, not the clock." That night, a massive thunderstorm rolled in. The wind howled like a banshee, and the rain hammered against the thin walls of the cabin. Ellie, terrified of storms since childhood, was curled up on her bed, trying to read a legal brief by the light of a sputtering oil lamp. A sudden blinding flash of lightning was followed by a deafening crack of thunder that shook the cabin to its foundation. Ellie gasped, dropping her brief. Jake, who had been sitting at the small table cleaning his saddle, looked up. He saw the genuine fear in her eyes. "Just a little summer storm, Vance," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle. Another crack of thunder. Ellie flinched, pulling her knees to her chest. Jake sighed, then did the unexpected. He didn't mock her. He simply walked over to the small wood-burning stove, opened the grate, and tossed in a few more logs. The fire crackled, casting a warm, orange glow that pushed back the shadows. "My mother used to say the thunder was just the sky rearranging the furniture," he murmured, sitting down on the edge of his own bed. "It'll pass." Ellie didn't move, but she felt a small measure of comfort from his presence. "I hate storms," she whispered. "Me too," he admitted, surprising her again. "Lost my parents in a flash flood when I was a kid. Storms always bring back the memory." The shared vulnerability was a tiny, fragile bridge between their two worlds. Ellie looked at him, seeing past the rugged exterior to the boy who had lost everything. "I'm sorry, Jake," she said, using his first name for the first time. He nodded, accepting the sympathy without needing to return it. "It's why I fight so hard for this ranch. It's all I have left of them." The storm raged on, but the tension in the cabin had eased. They sat in silence, the firelight flickering, two people from opposite ends of the world, bound together by a dead man's will and a shared quiet grief. Part 3. Deepening connection and the ranch crisis. The shared summer was beginning to change them both. Ellie stopped looking for loopholes and started looking for solutions. She realized that the Willow Creek pasture wasn't just a piece of real estate. It was the lifeblood of the broken spur. She started applying her formidable legal and business acumen to Jake's ranch books. She discovered that the broken spur was drowning in debt, not because of poor management, but because of outdated contracts and predatory loan terms. "Jake, your feed supplier is charging you 20% more than the market rate," she announced one morning, slamming a spreadsheet onto the kitchen table. "And this loan from the First National Bank, the interest rate is criminal. We can refinance, but we need collateral." Jake, who had been nursing a cup of black coffee, looked at the spreadsheet with a mixture of awe and suspicion. "I don't trust banks, Ellie. They're the reason we're in this mess." "I don't trust them either, but I know how to beat them at their own game," she countered, her eyes alight with the thrill of a real challenge. "We can use the Willow Creek pasture as collateral for a better loan, but only if we can prove its value. We need to maximize its yield this summer." The "we" slipped out naturally, and neither of them corrected it. They were a team now, a strange, mismatched partnership. Jake, in turn, began to teach her the ways of the ranch. He taught her how to ride Dusty, how to mend a saddle, and how to read the subtle signs of the weather. He was a patient, if demanding, teacher. One evening, they were out checking on a newborn calf that had been separated from its mother. The sun was setting, painting the vast Montana sky in shades of bruised purple and fiery orange. "You're getting good, Vance," Jake said, watching her gently guide the calf back to the herd. "It's Ellie," she corrected, smiling. "And I'm learning that a good day here is better than a good day in a courtroom." He looked at her, really looked at her. Her face was tanned, her hair was tied back in a messy braid, and the dirt smudges on her cheek only seemed to highlight the brightness of her eyes. She was still beautiful, but now she was real. "Ellie," he repeated, the name sounding foreign and intimate on his tongue. You're not a city slicker anymore?" He reached out and brushed a stray strand of hair from her face. The touch was electric, sending a jolt through her that had nothing to do with the setting sun. "You know, I thought you were going to be a disaster," he confessed, his voice low. "I thought you were going to be a Neanderthal," she whispered back. Their eyes met, and the air crackled with the tension that had been building since the first day in the cabin. He leaned in, his scent of pine and leather enveloping her, and their lips met in a kiss that was both rough and tender. It was a kiss of shared labor, mutual respect, and a sudden, overwhelming desire. The kiss broke the dam. They spent the next few weeks in a whirlwind of intense work and stolen moments. They talked for hours under the stars, sharing their dreams and their fears. Ellie learned about Jake's dream to turn the broken spur into a sustainable heritage ranch. Jake learned about Ellie's disillusionment with the cutthroat world of corporate law, but their newfound peace was short-lived. The external threat, Mr. Sterling of Sterling Development, began to make his move. One morning, they woke to find the main irrigation ditch from Willow Creek had been deliberately blocked with heavy rocks and debris. The water flow to the broken spur's main fields was cut off. "He's trying to starve us out," Jake growled, his face grim as he surveyed the damage. "He knows we need that water to prove the land's value for the loan." "He's smart, but I'm smarter," Ellie said, her lawyer's mind kicking into high gear. "This is illegal tampering with water rights. We can file an injunction, but it will take time. We need a temporary fix." They worked side by side for 18 hours straight, using shovels and a small backhoe to clear the blockage. Ellie, covered in mud and sweat, worked with a fierce determination that matched Jake's own. As they finally watched the water flow freely again, Jake pulled her into a tight, muddy embrace. "You saved us, Ellie. You and your fancy brain." "We saved us, Jake," she corrected, her heart swelling with a feeling of belonging she'd never known in New York. The next day, Mr. Abernathy arrived for his daily check. He looked at the two of them, mud-caked, exhausted, but triumphant, and smiled. "You two are certainly making a go of it," he observed. "But I have a letter here from Mr. Sterling. He's filed a motion with the court, claiming that Miss Vance's continued employment with her New York firm constitutes a violation of the Actively Participate clause, as she is clearly prioritizing her city career." The threat was real. Ellie had been doing remote work, trying to keep her job, but Sterling was using it against them. "He's right," Jake said, his voice heavy. "You can't do both, Ellie. You have to choose." Ellie looked at the vast, beautiful land, at the man she was fallen in love with, and at the life she was building with her own two hands. The choice was agonizing, but clear. "I'll resign," she said, the words a shock even to her own ears. "I'll tell my firm I'm taking an indefinite leave of absence. I'm all in, Jake. This ranch, this summer, us. I'm not letting Sterling win." Part 4. The final stand. With Ellie's full commitment, the pace of their work intensified. She used her legal knowledge to draft a countersuit against Sterling for water rights tampering and began negotiating the new loan with a small local bank, leveraging the potential of the Willow Creek pasture. Jake, meanwhile, focused on the physical labor, preparing the land for the appraiser and ensuring the cattle were healthy. The 3-month deadline was looming, and so was the emotional climax of their relationship. They were deeply in love, but neither had spoken the words. Ellie was terrified of admitting how much she had changed, and Jake was terrified of the vulnerability that came with love. One evening, they were sitting on the porch of the foreman's cabin, watching the stars. "What happens after the 3 months, Ellie?" Jake asked, his voice quiet. Ellie hesitated. "We sell the land, split the profits, and you use your share to pay off the bank and invest in the broken spur. That was the plan. And you go back to New York? She looked at him, her heart aching. I don't know. My life is there, my career, my apartment. Your life is here now, he said, turning to face her. You belong here. You're the only person who's ever understood what this land means to me. You're the only person who's ever made me feel like I could actually save it. And you're the only person who's ever made me feel like I'm more than a billable hour, she confessed, tears welling in her eyes. But Jake, I'm scared. I'm a city girl. I don't know how to be a rancher's wife. I don't want a rancher's wife, Ellie. I want you, he said, taking her hands. I love you. I love the way you fight for what's right, the way you look at the stars, the way you smell like horse and lavender now. Stay and help me build this life. The words were everything she had dreamed of, but her fear was a powerful cold current. Before she could answer, a loud, insistent knock echoed from the cabin door. It was Mr. Abernathy, looking grave. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I have urgent news. Mr. Sterling has just won a temporary restraining order against the broken spur. He convinced the judge that the Willow Creek pasture is being mismanaged and that the water rights are being abused. He's sending a crew in the morning to fence off the spring and start drilling his own well. The news was a punch to the gut. Sterling had used a technicality, twisting their efforts to maximize the land's value into a claim of abuse. No, Jake whispered, his face pale with fury. He can't. That'll kill the herd. The hearing for the permanent injunction is in 3 days, Abernathy said. But until then, the restraining order stands. You have to let his crew onto the land. Ellie's lawyer instincts took over, overriding her fear. No, we don't. A temporary restraining order is only valid if it's served properly. Did he serve us? Abernathy shook his head. He served me as the executor, but he hasn't served you two directly. He's trying to catch you off guard. Then we don't know about it, Ellie declared, a fierce light in her eyes. Jake, we have 3 days. We need to move the entire herd onto the Willow Creek pasture and secure the spring. If the cattle are already there and the spring is being actively used, Sterling's claim of mismanagement will be harder to prove in court. It was a desperate, risky move, a legal gamble that could backfire spectacularly, but it was their only chance. They spent the next 2 days in a frenzy of activity, moving the entire broken spur herd, hundreds of head of cattle, onto the disputed land. Ellie, riding Dusty like a seasoned pro, worked alongside Jake, her voice hoarse from shouting commands. On the morning of the 3rd day, just as the sun was rising, they finished. The cattle were grazing peacefully near the spring. As they stood on a ridge, watching the herd, they saw a convoy of black SUVs and heavy machinery rumble down the dirt road toward the pasture. Mr. Sterling had arrived. Ellie and Jake rode down to meet them. Sterling, a slick man in an expensive suit, stepped out of his car, a smug look on his face. Well, if it isn't the happy couple, Sterling sneered. Too late, Callahan. I have a court order. This land is mine until the hearing. You're mistaken, Mr. Sterling, Ellie said, stepping forward, her hands resting on the saddle horn. She was wearing her work clothes, but her voice was pure, unadulterated New York courtroom steel. We haven't been served, and as you can see, the land is being actively managed. In fact, we've moved the entire broken spur herd here. Any attempt to fence off the spring will be considered an act of animal cruelty and a violation of the existing water rights, which, as you know, are tied to the land's use. Sterling's face fell. He knew he'd been outmaneuvered. He hadn't expected the city lawyer to turn into a rancher who understood the law of the land better than he did. You'll regret this, Vance, he hissed. I doubt it, Ellie replied, a genuine, confident smile gracing her lips. See you in court, Mr. Sterling. Sterling and his crew retreated, defeated for the moment. Jake turned to Ellie, his eyes shining with pride and love. He dismounted and pulled her from her saddle, holding her tightly. "You are incredible," he murmured into her hair. "You are my miracle." "I love you, Jake," she finally said, the words feeling more right and true than any legal argument she had ever made. "I love this life. I love you." Epilogue, changed forever. 3 weeks later, the summer stipulation was over. Ellie, now officially on indefinite leave from her firm, had successfully argued their case in court. Sterling's restraining order was dissolved, and his claim of mismanagement was dismissed. The Willow Creek pasture was theirs, jointly. They didn't sell it. Instead, they used the land as collateral for the new, favorable loan Ellie had negotiated, securing the future of the Broken Spur. Ellie and Jake stood on the porch of the foreman's cabin, watching the first golden leaves of autumn drift down from the cottonwoods. The cabin was no longer a shack. It was home. They had painted it, fixed the roof, and filled it with their shared life. "You know, I still have that flight ticket back to New York," Ellie said, pulling a crumpled piece of paper from her jeans pocket. Jake wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. "Tear it up." She laughed, a sound of pure, unburdened joy. "I already did. I just wanted to see your face." "Good," he said, kissing the top of her head, "because I just bought a ring. It's not fancy. It's got a little diamond, but it's set in a piece of iron from the original Broken Spur fence line." Ellie turned in his arms, her eyes glistening. "It's perfect." "One summer," Jake said, his voice full of wonder. "One crazy, impossible summer. Changed our lives forever," Ellie finished, leaning up to kiss him. The city lawyer and the stoic cowboy, bound by a dead man's eccentric will, had found something more valuable than land or water rights. They had found a love as vast and enduring as the Montana sky, a love forged in the heat of conflict and the honest dirt of the Broken Spur Ranch. They had found home. Word count, 2,100. Continuation, the deepening roots. The engagement was a quiet affair, celebrated with a bottle of good whiskey and a long, slow dance in the dusty living room of the foreman's cabin. Ellie's resignation from her firm was met with shock and a flurry of emails, but she ignored them all. Her world was now measured in sunrises over the ridge, the lowing of cattle, and the comforting weight of Jake's arm around her. They decided to keep the foreman's cabin as their primary residence for the time being. It was on the Willow Creek pasture, a constant reminder of the summer that had brought them together, and it was a symbol of their joint ownership and commitment to the land. The main ranch house, a sprawling, aging structure, would wait. They wanted to build their life from the ground up, just as they had built their relationship. Ellie, however, was not content to simply be a ranch hand. She was a woman of action and strategy. She realized that while the Broken Spur was saved from immediate financial ruin, it was still operating on a razor's edge. "We need to diversify, Jake," she said one rainy afternoon, poring over a business plan she'd drafted. "The cattle market is too volatile. We have the most beautiful, untouched land in the valley. We should be capitalizing on that." Jake, who was mending a bridle, looked skeptical. "Capitalizing? You mean selling off pieces?" "No, I mean sharing it," Ellie explained, tapping a section of her plan. "Agritourism. We can convert the old bunkhouse into a high-end rustic retreat. People pay a fortune to escape the city and experience authentic ranch life. We offer a few guided trail rides, farm-to-table meals, and a chance to unplug. It brings in steady, non-volatile income, and it keeps the land intact." Jake was hesitant. He was a man who valued his privacy and the solitude of the ranch. "Bringing in city folk? They'll just complain about the dirt and the lack of Wi-Fi. We'll charge enough that they won't dare complain, Ellie countered with a grin. And we'll offer an experience so real, they won't want to. Think of it, Jake. We can hire a few local hands, boost the local economy, and secure the ranch for generations. It's a legal, business-savvy way to honor Silas's wish to keep the land from being sold. Ellie's passion was infectious. Jake, who had spent his life fighting to keep the ranch alive, was suddenly seeing a future where it could thrive. He realized that Ellie wasn't just a lawyer, she was a visionary. "All right, partner," he conceded, a slow smile spreading across his face. "You handle the contracts and the marketing. I'll handle the horses and the authenticity." The next few months were a blur of construction and planning. Ellie used her network to secure a small private investment. They hired a local contractor to renovate the bunkhouse, preserving its rustic charm while adding modern comforts. Ellie designed a website, wrote the marketing copy, and handled all the permits. Jake oversaw the physical labor, ensuring the integrity of the structures and the safety of the trails. During this time, their relationship deepened from passionate romance to a solid, working partnership. They learned to communicate not just with words, but with glances and shared silences. Ellie learned to trust Jake's instincts about the land, and Jake learned to trust Ellie's instincts about business. One evening, they were hanging a new sign for the Broken Spur retreat. Ellie stepped back to admire their work. "It's beautiful, Jake," she said. "It is," he agreed, but he wasn't looking at the sign. He was looking at her. "You know, when you first showed up in that white suit, I thought you were the end of everything. Now, I know you're the beginning." He pulled her close, and they stood there, two halves of a whole, watching the sunset over the land they had fought for and won. Continuation. The winter test. The first guests arrived just as the first snow began to fall. The Broken Spur retreat was an immediate success. Ellie's marketing had targeted a niche market of wealthy, stressed-out professionals looking for a digital detox. They loved the rugged beauty, the quiet, and the chance to ride a horse or learn to rope a calf. But winter in Montana was a different beast than summer. The work was harder, the days were shorter, and the isolation was profound. One particularly brutal blizzard hit in January. The power went out, the roads were impassable, and the temperature plummeted. They were completely cut off, with 3 guests stranded in the bunkhouse. The crisis tested their partnership in a way the summer had not. "The generator's fuel line is frozen," Jake announced, stomping the snow off his boots. "I need to get to the main barn for the spare parts, but the drifts are too high for the truck." "I'll go with you," Ellie said immediately, pulling on her heavy-duty parka. "No, Ellie, it's a mile walk and a whiteout. You need to stay here, keep the guests calm, and keep the fire going. And you need a second pair of eyes and hands," she insisted. "We're a team, Jake. I'm not letting you go out there alone." Jake knew arguing was pointless. He handed her a flashlight and a heavy rope. "We tie ourselves together. You stay behind me, and you don't let go of this rope for anything. Understand?" They set out into the blinding snow. The wind was a physical force, pushing them back with every step. Ellie, who had once complained about a little rain, now trudged through waist-high snowdrifts, her determination fueled by her love for Jake and her commitment to their life. Halfway to the barn, Jake slipped on a patch of ice hidden under the snow. He twisted his ankle with a sharp cry of pain. "Jake!" Ellie scrambled to his side. He was gritting his teeth, his face pale. "It's my ankle. I think it's broken. Damn it." Panic threatened to overwhelm Ellie, but she took a deep breath, channeling the cool, logical mind of the lawyer she used to be. "Okay, we're closer to the barn than the cabin. We keep going. Lean on me." "Ellie, you can't carry me." "I'm not carrying." "You! I'm stabilizing you," she snapped, already looping his arm over her shoulder. "You walk on your good leg. I'll take the weight. Now move, cowboy. We have a generator to fix." It took them an agonizing hour to reach the barn. Ellie helped Jake into the tack room, wrapped his ankle tightly with a scarf, and then, without a word, she found the spare fuel line, grabbed the tools, and went to work on the generator. She had watched Jake fix things 100 times. She remembered the sequence, the feel of the wrench, the smell of the oil. Her hands, once soft and manicured, were now calloused and strong. She worked methodically, her breath misting in the cold air, until finally, with a cough and a roar, the generator sputtered to life. Light flooded the barn. Ellie ran back to Jake, collapsing next to him, tears of exhaustion and relief streaming down her face. "We did it," she whispered. Jake pulled her into a fierce hug, ignoring the pain in his ankle. "No, you did it, Ellie. You're the toughest woman I've ever met. You're the heart of this ranch." The blizzard was a turning point. It proved to Jake that Ellie's commitment was not just a summer fling, it was permanent. It proved to Ellie that she was capable of surviving and thriving in a world she had once feared. Continuation. The family legacy. With the ranch stabilized and the retreat a success, Ellie and Jake began to plan their wedding. They decided on a simple ceremony in the fall, right on the ridge overlooking the Willow Creek pasture. But before the wedding, there was one more piece of unfinished business: the main ranch house. "We should move into the big house, Jake," Ellie urged. "It's your family's legacy. It's where you grew up. It needs life breathed back into it." Jake was resistant. "The cabin is ours, Ellie. We built our life here. The big house, it's full of ghosts." He finally confessed the full story of his parents' death. It wasn't just the flash flood. It was the fact that his father had been trying to save a piece of equipment he couldn't afford to lose, equipment that was only necessary because of the crushing debt the ranch was under. Jake felt that the main house was a monument to his father's failure and his own grief. "Jake, your parents didn't fail," Ellie said gently, holding his hand. "They were victims of circumstance and a bad economy. But you saved this ranch. You broke the cycle. The big house isn't a monument to failure. It's a testament to your strength. It's where your children should grow up." The mention of children was a soft, powerful blow. It was the first time they had spoken of a future that extended beyond their own lives. They walked over to the main house, a grand but neglected 2-story structure. The air inside was cold and still. As they explored the dusty rooms, Ellie noticed a small locked safe hidden behind a loose floorboard in the master bedroom closet. "Did you know about this?" she asked. Jake shook his head. "My dad was always secretive about money. Probably just old deeds or insurance papers." Ellie, with her lawyer's persistence, found the combination written in his father's old ledger, the date of Jake's birth. The safe creaked open. Inside, there were no deeds or insurance papers. There was a stack of old yellowed letters in a small velvet box. Jake picked up the letters, his hands trembling. They were from his great-uncle Silas to his father. Ellie read over his shoulder. The letters weren't about business. They were about a secret. Silas had been trying to help Jake's father for years, sending him money disguised as investments. But his father, too proud, had always sent it back. The last letter, dated just a month before the flood, was the most revealing. "Jacob, I know you're struggling. I've tried to help, but your pride is a stubborn thing. I've decided on a different path. I'm leaving the Willow Creek pasture to you, but I'm putting a stipulation on it. I'm going to force you to work with someone who can see the future, not just the past. I'm going to force you to work with a lawyer, a good one, a fighter. I'm going to force you to save your ranch, even if you won't do it for yourself. I've set it up so that only a partnership can succeed. Find the right partner, Jacob, and you'll find your way home." Jake looked at Ellie, his eyes wide with realization. "Silas didn't leave the land to us out of spite. He left it to us because he knew I needed a partner like you. He engineered this whole thing." Ellie picked up the velvet box. Inside was a simple silver locket. Engraved on the back were the words, "One summer." "He didn't just save the ranch, Jake," Ellie whispered, tears streaming down her face. "He saved us. He gave us a chance to find each other." The shock of the will reading, the anger, the forced proximity. It had all been a carefully orchestrated act of love by a lonely, eccentric old man. "He knew," Jake said, pulling her into a hug. "He knew you were coming." They spent the rest of the day cleaning the main house, not as a chore, but as an act of reverence. They were no longer fighting the past. They were embracing the legacy, continuation, the wedding, and the future. The wedding day was perfect. The autumn air was crisp, the sky was a brilliant, endless blue, and the ridge overlooking the Willow Creek pasture was decorated with simple wildflowers. Ellie wore a simple cream-colored dress, her hair braided with sprigs of wheat. She looked nothing like the corporate lawyer who had arrived in June, and everything like the woman Jake had fallen in love with. As she walked toward him, Jake, standing tall and proud in a dark suit and his best cowboy hat, felt a wave of emotion so profound it nearly brought him to his knees. He saw not just his bride, but the future of his family, the savior of his land, and the keeper of his heart. Mr. Abernathy, who had played his role as executor to perfection, officiated the ceremony. "Do you, Eleanor Vance, take this stubborn, dirt-loving cowboy to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Ellie laughed, a clear, joyful sound. "I do, with all my heart." "And do you, Jacob Callahan, take this brilliant, city-bred woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do," Jake rumbled, his voice thick with emotion. "Forever?" Their vows were simple, heartfelt promises to always work together, to always fight for their home, and to never let a little dirt or a little fear get in the way of their love. The reception was a joyous, raucous affair in the newly renovated main ranch house. The guests were a mix of Jake's ranching neighbors and a few of Ellie's bewildered but supportive former colleagues from New York. Ellie's former managing partner, a stern woman named Victoria, pulled Ellie aside. "Ellie, I still don't understand this," Victoria said, gesturing around the rustic room. "You gave up a partnership, a 7-figure salary for this?" Ellie smiled, a genuine, peaceful smile that Victoria had never seen before. "I didn't give up anything, Victoria. I traded a life of stress and hollow victories for a life of purpose and real love. I traded a title for a home. I traded a salary for a legacy." She looked across the room at Jake, who was laughing with a group of ranch hands, his eyes constantly seeking her out. "I found out that the most valuable thing I could own wasn't a corner office, but a piece of land, and the most important contract I could sign was with my heart." Victoria, a woman who had always prioritized career over everything, looked thoughtful. "Well, you look happier than I've ever seen you, Eleanor. Congratulations." Continuation, the next generation. 5 years passed. The Broken Spur Ranch was thriving. The agritourism retreat was fully booked year-round, providing a stable income. Ellie had used her legal skills to form a co-op with the neighboring ranches, giving them collective bargaining power against the big suppliers and developers. She was now the unofficial, highly respected business manager of the entire valley. Jake and Ellie had 2 children, a boy named Silas, after the eccentric uncle who brought them together, and a girl named Clara, after Jake's mother. They were raising their children in the main ranch house, which was now filled with the warmth of family, the smell of fresh-baked bread, and the happy chaos of toys and boots. One evening, Jake and Ellie were sitting on the porch, watching Silas, 4 years old, try to rope a fence post with a piece of twine, while Clara, 2 years old, chased a barn cat. "Remember that first day?" Ellie asked, leaning her head on Jake's shoulder. "I was so angry. I thought my life was ruined. I was terrified, Jake admitted. I thought you were going to be the final nail in the broken spurs coffin. I thought you'd sell the water rights and leave me with nothing. And then you made me muck the stalls, she teased. It was a test, he said, kissing her temple. And you passed. You didn't quit. You got mad, but you didn't quit. That's when I knew. Knew what? That you were a Callahan, even if you didn't know it yet. Ellie smiled, watching her son finally snag the fence post and let out a triumphant yell. We should thank Silas again, she said. He was a genius. He was a meddling old fool, Jake corrected, but his voice was full of affection. But he was right. We needed each other. Ellie stood up and walked over to her son, helping him untangle the twine. She looked out over the vast rolling land, the Willow Creek pasture, the main ranch, the mountains in the distance. It was all theirs, a legacy of love and hard work. She had come to Montana expecting a quick transaction and a return to her high-rise life. Instead, she had found a home, a purpose, and a love that was as deep and true as the ancient spring on the land.